Imagine you're singing a song with two friends. Close your eyes for a moment and really feel what it would be like. Imagine the rhythm of your feet tapping. Imagine your three voices singing the melody. Now imagine that one of your friends starts singing something different. She's making up a new melody or tune. It's not in the written music, but it still sounds good. The notes she's improvising or making up from the top of her head still feel like they're a part of the song. Suddenly, the same old song the three of you have sung together for months sounds exciting and new. The experience you just imagined with your friends is a little bit of what it might feel like to be a musician who plays jazz. You might be asking, what is jazz? That's a hard question to answer. Louis Armstrong was the famous jazz musician who wrote the song, What a Wonderful World. He once said, if you have to ask what jazz is, you'll never know. What do you think he meant by that? Even though the question is hard, let's work together to answer it. One way to explain jazz is to describe the qualities of the genre of music. A genre is a particular category or style of art. For example, jazz, hip-hop, reggae, and rock are all genres of music. Jazz songs are often written with a particular rhythm called swing. They often involve solos by individual performers. They also often involve improvisation. Yet just knowing these facts doesn't explain very much. After all, a song performed by Bessie Smith doesn't always sound like a song performed by Charles Mingus, even though both musicians used swing rhythm, solos, and improvisation in their work. Another way to explain jazz might be to say where it came from, though that's also a hard answer to pin down. Jazz evolved or slowly turned into its current form over time. We know jazz started with drumming traditions and rhythms in West Africa. During the time of slavery in the United States, plantation owners tried to stop enslaved African people from playing their music. But enslaved people worked in secret to keep their traditions alive, and they passed them on from generation to generation. After slavery ended in the middle of the 19th century, many black people in the United States continued to play West African music. Over time, some musicians who lived in the city of New Orleans also began to combine it with other musical traditions. Instruments like trumpets and saxophones came from marching band music. What other instruments do you think can be played to make jazz music? From European church music, early jazz musicians took complex harmonies, or notes that sound good when played at the same time, and scales, or sets of notes that form harmonies. The black musicians who first created jazz found ways to combine all of this in the new music they made. Over time, that music began to spread far and wide beyond New Orleans as musicians traveled first by steamboat up the Mississippi River and later by train to other towns and big cities across the United States. Another way to explain jazz is to talk about some of the people who performed it. One of the first jazz musicians that we know about is this man, Scott Joplin. Joplin grew up in Texarkana, located right on the border of Texas and Arkansas. His mother sang and played banjo, and his father played violin. As a boy, Joplin was fascinated by the music his parents played, and he began to study the piano. As an adult, he traveled the United States performing music in the ragtime style. Ragtime is a very early form of jazz music that Joplin learned from other black musicians on his travels through the South. His original ragtime songs, such as The Entertainer and the Maple Leaf Rag, were popular throughout the United States. You can still hear them today. Where can you look for Scott Joplin songs and other examples of ragtime music? Here's another jazz singer named Billie Holiday. When Holiday was a young girl living in Baltimore, she heard recordings of Louis Armstrong singing and playing jazz. Soon she found herself following in his footsteps, singing in nightclubs in Harlem, a historically black neighborhood in New York City. Harlem was the center of an artistic movement called the Harlem Renaissance, and many black writers, poets, artists, and thinkers lived and worked there. Billie Holiday was one of them. Holiday thought of her voice as a jazz instrument, and she incorporated improvisation into her emotional singing. Some of her most famous songs are What a Little Moonlight Can Do and God Bless the Child. Here is a jazz musician named Duke Ellington. Ellington grew up in Washington, D.C. in the early 1900s. Even as a child, Ellington had elegance, or manners and grace of the kind royalty might have, which is why one of his friends gave him the nickname Duke. Ellington started out playing ragtime piano, but he also added many more instruments, including strings and horns. The sound he helped create is called big band because it took a big band to play it. Ellington was an incredibly creative composer, and many of his songs remain jazz standards today. Some of his songs include Mood Indigo, In a Sentimental Mood, and Take the A Train. We've said a lot about where jazz comes from and about some of the people who helped create it. Do you feel like you really understand jazz just from what we've said? If you do, you might just make an amazing jazz musician one day. But for many of us, the only way to really understand jazz is to listen to it. Keep that in mind as we move through this unit. We'll read about some of the most famous and interesting jazz musicians, and you'll hear about their music and ideas and experiences they had that helped you inspire it. You'll learn more about the Harlem Renaissance, and you'll research more about specific performers you'd like to know more about. But remember, if you're not taking time to listen to jazz, you're not really learning about it. Or as Duke Ellington put it, it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing.